Welcome back to the Pocket Coach Academy videos over the spring UIL topic. So today we're going to dive into the consequentialism AF. So this is going to be more of a case that's focused on mountains of evidence, explaining why, your side saves more lives than the other side. So the last case focused more on economic resilience. This focuses more on like measurable progress for nations. So once again, we're going to break it down into framework, impacts, and solvency to show how globalization kind of acts as the ultimate engine for human well-being. So we start with the framework. Um, some of the same baseline definitions that we had, right? So developing countries, globalization, protectionism. At the heart of the case is going to lie the value, which is going to be morality, which is simply defined as the belief that some debaters um, that are some specific behaviors are right and that others are wrong. So how do we decide which is which? So the criterion is going to be consequentialism, and that's the theory that the moral worth of an action is determined solely by its outcomes. So why are we using this, right? So first, we have like this inherent link, which is going to be this Haynes-Sitz evidence, which argues that most people believe the point of morality is to spread happiness and relieve suffering. That is kind of what consequentialism is based on. And then second, we have this Harris evidence about scientific realism that provides, a pretty good argument that says that if morality affects the well-being of conscious creatures, then there are right and wrong answers based on the factual outcomes of those decisions. So you're using this framework to trap the negative. They're arguing for national sovereignty or cultural protection. You can ask, does that sovereignty actually make people's lives better? Because if it doesn't lead to better health, wealth, or safety, then consequentialism says that it isn't the moral choice. So then we get into the actual, contentions of everything here, right? So we have contention one, which is going to be technology. So we're going to start about how globalization, can help with the transfer of technology. As the Coupler 2024 evidence shows that globalization forces innovation in healthcare and pharmaceuticals. More importantly, as the Erickson and 20 evidence points out, globalization is the only way for developing countries to get into green tech, because without trade, solar panels, electric vehicles kind of remain luxuries for the rich. But with trade, those things can be, transported to other nations as well. So for countries vulnerable to climate change, as this Campbell Lindrum '07 evidence points out, globalization provides the tools to survive those environmental shifts by integrating some of that technology into their everyday lives. So then we can get into this second contention here, which is going to focus more on the economic benefits of globalization in developing nations. So we start with this Heimberger in 2021 evidence that argues or covers over 5,000 estimates and confirms that in trade globalization, it consistently promotes growth. There's a couple of stats that prove this. So we have a piece of Irwin evidence in 2022 that explains how extreme poverty fell from 42% in 1981 to just 8.6% in 2018. And then this Kaya evidence, shows that 64 developing nations, globalization was a primary driver in developing more jobs in manufacturing in particular that helped boost economic well-being in that country. So that's kind of the big one argument you can make, that there's nearly 40 years of history where globalization lifted billions of people in developing nations outside of poverty. So that is going to boost your argument for the consequential aspects of why globalization is better than protectionism. So then we can get on to this next contention, uh, the Soyson 11 evidence, which specifically argues that countries are more bound together by trade and have better human rights records based on that, and higher levels of democratization because it is more economically beneficial for them to do so. Um, this is also, pointed out in further pieces of the Erickson evidence, which also highlights that gender equality is a huge beneficiary of globalization because it basically, as tough as it is to say, it makes discrimination more of an expensive, practice than, a practical one in a lot of these nations. It forces firms to hire and pay women fairly, not only to just remain competitive, but also because, a lot of countries will not, trade with them if they don't create, better economic conditions for equal pay and equal rights for all people in the developing nations. You have a lot of countries, less and less like the United States, but a lot of European countries, China, a lot of those countries will not trade with economies that don't give women or other minority populations fair deals when it comes to economic access. So that's a key reason why globalization can also boost, equality in a lot of these other developing nations as well. So, really, what we're looking at in terms of the solvency of this affirmative, right, is that the mechanism is really incentivized well-being. So, there are a couple of reasons why developing nations would want to prioritize globalization for the consequential aspects of it. First is the death of distance. Globalization solves isolation. By prioritizing trade, a developing nation ensures that its people have access to a lot of the same life-saving medications and technologies that are developed in Oxford or Silicon Valley. Pharmaceutical developments, green technology to help prevent energy crises in those nations. Um, by prioritizing trade, a developing nation that might not have some of those resources, natural to their own um, lands, can get those resources and get access to, high, life-saving technologies that can prevent mass death in those countries. Second, you have the welfare multiplier, as the Alonderju evidence cites that study of 110 countries that globalization decreases child mortality, and it does this by increasing human capital, better schools, better hospitals, better infrastructure that comes along with the resources garnered by globalized trade and the benefits of that. And third is going to be correcting for biases because the affirmative recognizes that while financial globalization can be volatile, trade globalization is a more stable path to prosperity because it allows for physical jobs and physical tangible goods to be produced by a country. So while protectionism might feel good for like national pride, it kind of acts as more of a tax on poor populations because it keeps technology and life saving goods outside of reach, while globalization solves that by opening the gates towards those. So, to win the consequentialism math, remember a couple of things. First is the moral high ground. Do not let the negative act like they are the only ones who care about poor people. Your evidence shows that your policy is one that actually feeds them and keeps children alive. Second, demand facts from the evidence. If the negative argues that globalization harms culture or harms national identity, ask them for the same level of empirical data you have. They will not have 110 country study to back them up. Third is the poverty pivot. Use the Irwin 2022 evidence constantly. A drop from 42% to 8.6% in extreme poverty is one of the greatest achievements in human history, and you are attributing it directly to your side of the resolution with globalization. So when the consequences are this clear, the choice is pretty simple. And that's why judges are going to vote for you if you focus on those specific things. So in the next one, we will go over the economics F, and then we'll round up the affirmative side with the justice F after.